Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Bull, as well as the latest episode of The Enemy Within. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I had to say about the season finale of Bull, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Enemy Within. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the season finale of Bull. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. It's actually kind of like this heartbreaking and very sad case, because essentially this little girl Lizzie dies and her stepmom gets blamed for it. In fact, her stepmom is being called like the Soho step monster or something like that. Yeah. And as this whole complicated situation of her, because basically the little girl died with a whole bunch of salt in her system, and now it turns into this situation of like, okay, so she's a stepmother who had this daughter, because her husband had Lizzie from a different relationship, and they, Angela and Mr. Newton have their own child together, and so it turns into this thing of like, oh, does she love that other child more than Lizzie? But then like Bull kind of got that out of the way immediately. It's like, oh, when you became a real mother, she's like, let's get the facts straight. I became a mother when 2 years ago, because Lizzie meant that much to her. But now it turns this whole situation, everyone trying to paint her in a very bad light, because he even tried to do that in court, trying to say like, oh, it's like, oh, her relationship with her daughter was different, because it was like, oh, her other child was her own child, and it's like, oh, after she had a new baby, she was kind of treating Lizzie a little differently and everything like that, the lady who was running this program that she was going to and everything like that. But then Benny, once Benny gets in his bag and everything, because Taylor hooked him up with some information, it's like, oh, read this post that you put online, because she tries to say like, oh, like at one point, Lizzie was like, apparently like, well, Angela's like, Lizzie had thrown up in a cab or something. She had to clean it up, and she's just stressed out because she's taking care of 2 kids by herself because her husband's away most of the time. So she's kind of the one, she's like the primary caretaker in the situation. And it turns into that situation where she was like, she's saying that Lizzie's kind of, the way Lizzie's been acting and stuff like that. It's like she's like the kid out of The Exorcist. It's like sometimes I think about just leaving her in a cab and stuff like that. And everyone's like, but immediately, even I was like, okay, like, is it kind of a fucked up thing to say? Sure. But plenty of parents who are stressed out say crazy shit like that. You got tired parent brain, so I'm not going to chalk you up on it. If you acted upon it, that's completely different. Saying some shit, but you can understand where someone's coming from, because those words could be something like, oh, that could be a key sign that like you might do something crazy like that. But it's like, at the same time, people just say stupid shit sometimes. And even then, once again, getting back to what I was saying before, Benny getting his bag, it's like, oh, what did you say on this post? All about shoving something up in your neighbor's ass because of something. It's like, yeah, sometimes we say stuff we don't mean. If, it turns out that your neighbor ended up dead, should they charge you for murder? It's like, no, sometimes we say stuff we don't necessarily mean. So there's that side of things. There's obviously, the ex-wife, Miss Newton, she had a very different perspective when it came to Angela. It's like, obviously, like, her and her husband got divorced, but obviously Lizzie was a big part, they were both a big part of Lizzie's life, but it's like, oh, David wasn't there anymore since the divorce and everything, so it turns into this ugly situation of like, yeah, he got remarried, because she was even outright blaming the new relationship. It's like, oh, he married some woman immediately, got remarried pretty quickly, and they already have a baby. So in her mind, it's kind of like, oh, this is some stranger I don't know who's primarily taking care of my child, plus you already have another child of your own, and on top of that, so it's kind of like, you don't love my daughter like I love my daughter, because it's like, oh, when she's with me there was no issues, but all of a sudden there's issues when she's around Angela, and because Angela's the one she's around most of the time, not David, because David's kind of away for work or whatever. So it turns into that situation of like, oh yeah, I don't like the way she handles my daughter, like this is someone I don't know, she's a stranger. Oh, she put like a pepper flake on her tongue because she was eating lip balm, and it was, well, she didn't know at the time, but it's like, as a means of punish her, she put it on her tongue, and was just, and and from the mom's perspective, it's like, oh, that woman, she's evil, she's a terrible person, how can she torture my daughter like that? Which we later on find out, it's like, no, Lizzie was eating lip balm, so she was doing that to kind of teach her not to do that. That was her way of punishing her. So, and then it adds in the context of like, oh, her pediatrician is actually the one who suggested it, because initially the thing is, Bull had Benny go in there, kind of go at her hard, which Benny didn't want to, because it's like she's a grieving mother, but it's like, yeah, if we don't go hard and kind of set this shit down, it's like our client might go to jail for something she didn't really do. And so it turns into a situation of Benny kind of coming after her and being like, the fact of the matter is, you know, it's been 2 years since she's been in your daughter's life, and yet not in that time you didn't see her. It's like, no, it's because you felt replaced, didn't you? She's like, no, I didn't feel replaced. I was replaced. So you could tell that played a part in it. There was a little animosity because it's like, oh, you're the new lady, because obviously she's younger and everything. So that's going to obviously play into her insecurities, because it's like, you know, it's like, oh, like there's this woman and she's taking care of my child. It's like, but that's my child. It's to be fair, you're allowed to feel the complicated feelings you have in this situation, especially when it comes to your own child and everything. When it comes to your family, of course, it's going to be kind of hard. And then it's kind of like, oh, do you not realize that she got that tip because, like, oh, your daughter was eating lip balm? It's like, oh, I didn't know that. Also, did you know she got that from your pediatrician? And that pediatrician is also your pediatrician too. And she's like, I didn't know. And for her, that's what it all kind of circles back to in the long run of everything, you know, because we end up finding out this sad situation about, you know, Lizzie, is the fact is we ended up, you know, they ended up going through her room because they wanted to get like a photo album or something, you know, to be like, oh, showing the good times between like Angela and Lizzie. And they found one, but it was a little like messed up. There's even teeth marks in it. A lot of stuff in her room. It looks a little ragged. It's because she has pica. It's basically this almost like a condition of just eating stuff, because that was kind of a thing that kept coming up. It's like, yeah, she would continuously eat and eat and eat and just wouldn't stop. But it doesn't just stop with, you know, it was like a whole bunch of salt in her diet, in her stomach. That's how she died. She overdosed on salt. And that's what this whole situation is about. It's because it's like her condition made so she eats a whole bunch of stuff like chalk, dirt, you know, whatever, like objects and stuff like that. And the thing is, salt, it actually helps alleviate that sensation. So she probably just snuck into some salt, because even Angela was like, yeah, I caught her in the cabinet, you know, tearing stuff apart. She must have gotten to the salt den, but I didn't realize it. I didn't think much of it. And then it turns into that situation of like, oh, that's what happened. She like ate a whole bunch of salt, and that's sadly what ended up happening. And obviously Miss Newton was kind of reluctant, because, you know, it's like, oh, in the courtroom, obviously they went after her hard and everything, kind of eviscerated her. But it's like, yeah, I understand. Like, obviously you're going through a hard time. I mean, the conversation never came around to it, but let's not forget, Bull was in that similar situation. Not necessarily the same circumstances, but he lost a child to him and Isabella. I always forget, is Izzy's full name Isabella or Isabel? I forget. Anyway, just go with Izzy. But him and Izzy lost their child, you know, so it's kind of a similar story. But he never makes that comparison. I guess that's something he doesn't want to kind of use as a means of helping with a case. It's like, that's our thing, and I don't want to use it as kind of ammunition. So it's kind of interesting, because the way Bull kind of operates, he kind of uses everything as kind of ammunition, for him not to use something like that to kind of make a connection between him and whoever he's trying to talk to. But what bothered her the most, you know, Mrs. Newton, was the fact is that Angela might know her daughter better than her. That's what bothered her the most, because it's like, you know, and it's something Bull says to make her feel better, because it's like no one's fault in this situation. It was a medical condition that she had. It's like 3 good parents. It's not like they're terrible, horrible people that were abusing her or anything. It's like, no, the 3 people that loved her, plus a pediatrician. No one saw the sign, so it's not on her. But it's like, the fact is, if you don't speak up now, Angela might go to jail for something she's not responsible for, because at the end of the day, she loved your daughter. And, you know, and on the stand, you know, Miss Newton kind of admits that. It's like, she didn't want to pay attention to the signs, because it would admit that Angela might know her daughter better than her. And she kind of breaks down, because it's like, I saw her eat chalk twice and dirt, but I was thinking that was just what kids do. And, you know, she feels responsible. It's like, if I had paid attention, maybe I could have, but it's like, you couldn't have known, you know? It's like, once again, it's like, that's stuff that kids do, especially at that age, because, you know, Lizzie was like 3 years old. It's like, yeah, you expect kids to do that, so you wouldn't chalk up to that. Plus, like I said, just the complicated nature of feeling like being replaced and everything. Your ex-husband is already moving on, continuing his family, plus he's getting your daughter too. Like, obviously it's split custody, but it's still just a complicated situation all around. But I did like it when it was all said and done, and she was found not guilty. She went out, like, Angela went over and hugged Mrs. Newton. And the fact is, the husband was there too, because it's like, they're in this together, because it wasn't just on, you know, Mrs. Newton that lost a daughter. They lost a daughter too, all, you know, and they have each other. It's not the easiest thing, but I think they can come together. I think maybe Mrs. Newton can be there for, Angela and David's baby as well, like, because they come together through this loss and remember the little girl that they all lost, not just one parent, all of them lost her, so I try to think of maybe the silver lining to it is that maybe it will bring them together, just sad that it took like a loss to kind of do that, but try to find some silver lining to it. So the case has like, a very, sad but, nice resolution in that regard. And then obviously on top of all this, Benny's dealing with his own situation this episode because it turns out, hey, he found out that his sister's getting a divorce, and Bull's kind of like, huh, really? That's interesting. It didn't click in my head to think about that immediately until Benny learns from his aunt later on. It's like, oh, the marriage fell apart because of an affair, and I was like, oh wait, didn't Bull and Izzy? I was like, oh, and it's like, yeah, the husband, and Benny's getting all pissed. It's like, oh yeah, he must have had an affair. I'm like, oh, Bull. It's like Bull's hiding it. It's like, right, it wasn't super clear. Like I thought Bull just wasn't saying anything. I didn't realize he was outright hiding it until as the episode progressed. I'm like, you are outright just not saying anything, because Benny's like, oh, I can murder him. But it's like, yeah, if you murder him, I wouldn't know any other great lawyers out there to help you out of your situation. So him and Benny kind of laugh about that. But it's like, lo and behold, Benny finds out about everything, and he ends up telling him, it's like, I need the room with Bull right now. Everyone's looking at him, all right, what the hell is going on here? And he's like, because he's pissed at Bull because it's like, oh, you can't control yourself, you and your sexual urges and stuff like that. Because I think it's because he knows who Bull is. It's like, oh, the fact of the matter is you kind of go from one woman to the next. You never kind of complete. Like, Isabella was the kind of like last person that he kind of settled down with. Obviously, him and Diana. That's a whole thing I'm definitely going to discuss in a little bit. But there's a whole thing of like, oh, it's just it's almost kind of like, oh, you hit it and quit it type of situation with my sister. She was in a vulnerable situation. We were literally burying our father. We had literally just buried our father, and you sleep with her. Bull's trying to be like, it's not like that, because for him, it's, because for Benny, like obviously he believes in the sanctity of marriage and stuff like that. It's something he actually brought up earlier in the episode, which I guess was very foreshadowing, because it's like, oh, marriage didn't work out. Obviously Benny's not married, and obviously his sister's no longer married again, and now it's a situation of there's no grandchildren. It's like, so that's a whole thing. But, Bull tries to be like, yeah, but your sister made the moves on me first. She kissed me first. And Benny's like, take it back. He's like, Bull's like, what, are we 11 years old? He's like, take it back. And then he starts chasing him around. I'm like, oh, it's almost a little funny to see it. But then he gets on top of Bull, and then it's like, Bull's like telling him to grow up, and Benny punches him in the face, and it's like, you grow up. He's like, I'm gonna be professional about this whole situation, but after this, I'm done with this. I'm done with everything. I'm done with you. And it's like, jeez, dude. I mean, you can understand, because for one, and it's something, that comes up later on, and, Izzy brings it up of like, yeah, my brother has a tendency to get very defensive when it comes to family and stuff like that, so obviously he's pissed at you. Like, obviously, like, Benny kept up the professionalism throughout the case of, like, obviously you can tell things are heated between him and Bull. I love it that like Bull's lip is split open. You have Chunk just ducked down, looking down at him. Everyone else intact is kind of like, oh, are you okay? I love Marissa. He's like, give me some alcohol. He's like, can you please give me some alcohol? She's like, okay. And she goes, get the alcohol. He's like, what is that? He's like, no, I meant the other alcohol. She's just looking at him. Which obviously Bull kind of spirals, because obviously Benny's is like his best bud. I mean, they are family. They were family, and they stayed family. That was actually something Izzy had talked about. Was that back in season 1 or season 2? She had talked about the fact is that, she almost felt like Bull had taken Benny from her. I feel like it was season 2 we got introduced to Izzy. Maybe it was season 1. I don't remember. But nevertheless, so, it's that whole situation. It's kind of sad just because it was that situation of, because obviously Bull wasn't trying to do like a hit it and quit it type of situation. He wanted, it's like, oh, we can rekindle the flame. He thought something was there, but obviously it was just kind of like she was in a desperate, like, it was a thing of kind of like she was kind of using him to kind of, she was lost her dad, and obviously Bull is a familiar situation. Obviously things weren't going great in the marriage already. So, her current marriage. And so, obviously, like I said, Bull felt good and familiar. So, you slept back into, potential bad habits and stuff like that. So, but obviously, I think for Benny, he didn't want to think of like, no, there's no way my sister would do something like that. It had to be you. It's like, because I guess in his mind, Benny having the morals that he does, he's almost like, oh, you saying that, it's almost trying to say like, oh, my sister's some home wrecker, like she wrecked her own home or something like that. That's how he kind of took it. So I thought that was very fascinating. it's kind of interesting because this episode kind of centers around a lot about kids and stuff like that. In particular, there's the other side of things where Marissa, obviously, she's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, but she's like, no. When it comes to like the whole baby thing, like my eggs, I froze them like 8 years ago, so there's probably an issue there. And the doctor's like, no, your eggs are good, you're in good condition, like you can have these babies, it can work out for you. And she's like, happy, but obviously things aren't good on Greg's side of things. And when the time comes, because Greg's actually kind of excited. It's like, oh, I saw some kids. It's like, oh, I'm thinking like in a year or so, that's going to be me. And then Marissa's like, I changed my mind. I hope you don't get mad. And it's like, he's like, no, of course not. You're my everything. And she's like, you're my everything too. And immediately go, Marissa gave up having kids because she doesn't want Greg to know the truth. Because it's going to turn into this complicated thing. Because she's made the mindset, she made it clear, like, okay, this is what I want, and Greg got on board too, because it's like, whatever decision you decide to make, I'm going to make with you. So you want to have kids, I'm on board. And he's actually excited with the idea of having kids. So if it turns out like she can have kids, and then it's like, oh, she can't have kids with him, then it's going to turn into this thing of she doesn't want to complicate the relationship, especially because they've only like somewhat recently still gotten back into each other's lives and everything. Obviously, it's been a little while now, but still, it's still kind of a relatively still fresh, getting back together situation. And so I think she's afraid of losing that, because it's like, it add this complicated element to the relationship, like, oh, the reason why you can't have children, which I know you want to have children, is because of me. And so even if they adopted and stuff like that, which I'm sure that would still be, because Marissa would probably want to have her own kids. I mean, to be fair, probably Greg would probably find out the truth eventually, and then they would adopt. But I think that for her, it's probably always going to be that nagging thing of like, I can never have my own kids. Or at least that's how she feels like Greg will probably feel like. And so it'd probably be an issue if she doesn't want to rock the boat with the relationship. So she's just making it seem like, no, I just made this decision. I hope you're okay with it. He's like, oh, whatever you decide, I'm okay with it. But I think because she's afraid to tell him the truth, which is, kind of sad. And I think that's something she's going to sit on for a while. But I think Greg, whatever the case may be, might stumble across that information on his own. We'll see. And now continuing the baby news, which actually kind of makes that situation, I think, even sadder, because everything going down with Bull and Isabel, them kind of having that shack up moment. Turns out Isabel's pregnant, and she's like, well, the fact of the matter is, Benny might be mad at you for now, but he won't be for long, because he's about to be an uncle, the whole grandkids, no kids in the family. But now it's like, hey. And obviously he's going to be pissed at Bull, but now it's like, hey, something good came out of it. So, which I'm sure that situation would affect Marissa in a very interesting way. Like I said, it almost would make it sad, because it's like, oh, Bull gets to have his own kid. Because I think whether they'll go down this angle is something you do have to think about. Marissa, what does she spend most of her time doing? Taking care of Bull. So to see him kind of have that, what she can't have, maybe it caused some resentment. Maybe not. Like I said, I don't know if that's necessarily an angle they would go down, but that's potentially a route they could go down. Then there's the whole, Isabel being like, oh, kiss me, did you forget how to do it? He's like, oh, no, and they start making out, and I'm like, which that's what started this whole situation in the first place, getting Benny pissed, which, once again, I have to bring up the whole conversation of, what about Diana? You and Diana got in good graces again after the whole Isabel situation caused some problems there. But it's like, once again, I don't 100% see where him and Diana stand. I chalk it up to being like, oh, they haven't gotten all monogamous. I guess it's kind of fun, but this is definitely going to complicate things, because not only are you having a kid, it's also the fact of the matter is there's potentially a relationship there, which things haven't worked out like twice. Technically, it didn't work out the first time, but the second time it was just kind of like her being like, oh, I wasn't really, it's just kind of like, I was grieving, I needed help. It's a whole complicated thing. Once again, kind of falling back into bad habits for everyone all around. So it's interesting to kind of think about where that potentially could take us going forward into the future, potentially. Bull is being renewed for a 4th season. This isn't typically the platform I talk about this stuff, because it isn't something I'm well versed in, which obviously it's that whole thing of separating a show from everything else that's kind of associated with it, but you can't. So I don't know how I personally feel about the situation. I'll keep to myself. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's some stuff associated with Bull, which I won't talk about because I'm not versed in it. I haven't read up enough on it to feel completely okay on talking about it. It's stuff I've read here and there. It seems like there's also more stuff, so I'm just going to leave it at that. There's just some complicated stuff, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. If you are curious, I highly recommend you read into it yourself, and you can, make the decision for yourself about like what that means for you and how you feel about everything. So And now moving on to this week's episode of The Enemy Within. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We kind of go back and see we go back 8 months and find out about Bacchus and his relationship with Tall. It makes you wonder what dirt did Tall get on him. Obviously, that wasn't the beginning because he's like, oh, that tape isn't enough for me to go all treasonous. But Tall is like, oh, but it's not just that. I know what you want. He basically makes him the national security advisor. He gives him, because that's what he wants. He wants power. He wants to be in position. It's like, oh, you want to be in those rooms, essentially, be able to get in those rooms where the powerful conversations are had. And I can get you there. All you have to do is kind of help me out. So at the very least, for the past 8 months, Tall has had this kind of intel. We learned from Desmond that his target is a congresswoman named Bell. Interestingly enough, this same congresswoman is one of the people who pushed super, super hard to take down Erica about the whole situation of like, oh, she's treasonous, she's terrible. In fact, I think it was even, I think the whole conversation came up of like, oh yeah, I think Kate was like, you do know that she also pushed to try to go to the judge to push for the death penalty. And Erica's like, oh yeah, I know. It's like, ugh. So that's awkward because even like it's playing on the screen and Erica just has to sit there and take it. I mean, to be fair, she's had to take it for the past 3 years from plenty of people hating her, calling her disgusting, calling her a monster, a murderer, this and that. So it's like, hearing it from the congresswoman doesn't matter. Just the only thing that bothered Erica about it, because it was like, the fact of the matter is you're saying all this stuff, but that's just because you are trying to benefit from a platform standpoint. So there's that. But I do like that the fact of the matter is, it's like, Bacchus as well as Montanello are, the whole advisor group and stuff like that are trying to be like, oh yeah, we're going to take over the investigation into Tall. Yeah, you did good to get the information you did. You saved the congressman. That's all fine and dandy. But the fact of the matter is, we're stepping forward from here. Fact is, you cross some lines here and there. But he's like, the fact of the matter is, we're close to taking down Tall. And it's like, they're trying to take this from him. Will didn't appreciate that because he's like, yeah, the fact is they're doing this because he's like, the timing's a little off. It's like, you just happen to do this now, especially because we're making huge advancements towards Tall. We ended up saving a congresswoman. We're in some deep intel. We know that he's actually committing an attack, soon. So it's kind of crazy that we're deep in this investigation. We've been investigating for the past 3 years, and now you're taking us off of it. So he has Daniel and Bragg looking into him. So that's interestingly enough. We'll kind of circle back to that. But he brings Erica along too, because the whole thing is, like, obviously they're getting pulled off this investigation. For Erica, she kind of has nothing at this point. She can't see Hannah anymore because of Chris, understandably, but also she's losing her chance to go after Tall with this Tall investigation. So it turns into a situation of, okay, so once it's all said and done, she'll go back to being locked up because that whole deal kind of goes away the moment this whole investigation ends. So it turns into that thing of like, okay, but Keaton kind of does an off-sanction thing. He goes meets with Bell, and he brings in Shepard, and like you could tell Bell gets pissed being in front of Erica, like all this traitor, calling her out, saying all these different things to her and stuff like that. I love Erica being like, the fact of the matter is, you use me as a means to kind of bolster your platform and stuff like that. Even the whole situation of, the fact is you're hiding something. Because the fact of the matter is, Tall's coming after you like this, like it has to be something from your past. And so she sees something, she's like, that's it. It is something from your past, isn't it? But the fact of the matter is, when it came down to it, Belle flipped it. She's like, this is some unsanctioned shit, ain't it? The fact of the matter is, you here on your own, and you, Erica, what's up with you? It's like, you're hiding something. She even brings it up later on. She's like, oh, you're looking for a redemption for those 4 agents? The fact of the matter is, you're always going to be in jail, can you get redemption and stuff like that? And then it's Erica's like, thank you. She's like, for what? It's like, thanks to this, I know what's up. You used to be part of the CIA. The way you're kind of diverting, like the way you're trying to keep calm, cool, and collected, that's some CIA tactics. I looked in your files. There's a 14-month period missing. Oh, yeah, that's just enough time to go through some CIA training. It's like, oh, freak. Look at Erica kind of like dismantling some shit like that. Because I even love like Belle being like, oh, I'm not going to, you have no authority to question me and stuff like that. But, you had Keaton be like, I'm the one that has authority here. She's what? It's almost one of those moments of being like, I'll have your badge for this type of thing. Which, funny enough, that kind of comes up in this episode, but we'll get to that soon enough. But we learn that she was part of the CIA, in particular Black Ops. And so we find out why Tall is motivated the way he is. The CIA reached out to him to kind of get some intel about some stuff, and he promised to pull him and his brothers out. His brothers are the only family he had left for a good chunk of, like, they lost their parents fairly young, so his brothers are the only family he had. But because of a U.S. strike, they ended up dying, because it's like, yeah, we're not going to pull them out because they're not necessary anymore. We got the information we needed. Some higher ups had made that decision. At least that's what Bell said. So when the time came, Tall wasn't there because he was waiting for the CIA, to pull them out. But lo and behold, that's what this been. It's a 10-year vendetta against the people who killed his brother, his only family. And so that's what this whole thing is about. That's why in particular he's been aiming for CIA agents in particular. I mean, he wants to strike the country anyway, but obviously I think holds a special resentment towards the CIA. But to be fair, the CIA, I guess in his mind, is like a byproduct of everything that America stands for. So its values and its morals, it's like those morals and values led to my brothers being killed. Like the way decisions are made like that, so calculated and so callous. It's that it just took one decision to just not care enough about another human being who's helping you out that led to this death and destruction. It's crazy how things kind of play out like that. She never says anything, but with conversations that came up, Jackie and Bragg end up asking her about time with the CIA, and she's like, I spent 6 years there, which I think is kind of bullshit, but we'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is, she was kind of like, yeah, sometimes it was good because, you did everything for, your community. You were part of a greater unit of just kind of like, yeah, you're doing this for your country. It was more than just you. But obviously there was the bad side of things where it's like, oh, you have to be a traitor. People look at you disgusted. The fact is you had to play a certain role, be something that that people hated. And so it kind of seems very reflective, because at the same time you're hearing this conversation, like it cuts back to Erica. So I think it kind of plays true. And it's almost like Belle was almost saying that towards her, because like I said, Belle had even confronted her. It's like, the fact is you are looking for redemption, but there's something else, something you're keeping secret from the world. And Erica playing coy is like, yeah, I think you should get ready. Like, it's like, yeah, Belle's closing in. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But my thought process is, I don't think Belle was in charge and made that decision. I think she's the one, because the thing is, Tall even said himself, because Sigourney is like, I'm sorry, I know how important she was to you. Because even Bacchus was like, the fact of the matter is she's not important. We could go along with the plan. She can't stop it. No one can. And he's like, I still want her. She has to be the one that recruited him all those years ago. I think that's what it has to be. That's why I'm thinking like she worked with the CIA a lot longer than she's pretending to, because she doesn't want to admit what this is all about. I don't know if she was like, I don't know if that's how things kind of operate. Like, I don't know whether it's a situation of you could be higher up in the CIA and then go to Black Ops. I mean, that's probably potential, but I'd assume like you'd go from Black Ops to like a higher position, because obviously Black Ops kind of, I would assume, kind of do like the dirty work and stuff like that. So I'm assuming either she was the one that orchestrated the strike that killed his brothers, or she's the one that was trying to help him out but ended up betraying him, because it's like, you made that decision. Even though someone higher up made that decision, you're still the ones that recruited me, and you didn't keep your word. You didn't keep your end of the bargain, even if someone else is involved. That person's issue all on their own, but you went back on your word. So I think she definitely has a deeper connection. The reason why Tall wants her dead more so than all. I mean, he's literally made 2 attempts on her life, so. Which is, I thought was kind of neat too, because obviously immediately after finding out she's CIA, the dude had the gun out. She takes it, disarms him, and Shepard ends up knocking him out. That was pretty impressive, but still. So there's that. When it comes down to it, they are able to arrest Bacchus, but his target wasn't it like a station or something? I forgot what it was exactly he's saying the target was, but it's not the target itself, it's the people in it that he's aiming for, because he, once again, is trying to cause as much destruction and mayhem, because it's like, I guess because he wants it to be an attack that they remember, because this is going to be potentially like a very large scale attack. So that's all Bacchus kind of gives out, because it's like, no matter what you do, there's no stopping it. That's why I think he's okay with giving the information out, because he wants to be like, oh, I don't want to serve a single amount of jail time, but it's like, yeah, that's not going to help. That's not going to happen. So there's that. Because Bragg had found out, Bragg and Daniel had found out, like, yeah, there's stuff leading to Keaton's suspicions about Bacchus, which Montanello pops up later on, and she's taking in Daniel because Daniel skirted over like not having a warrant and looking into Bacchus. And it turns out even later on when it's found out like, oh yeah, like he turned out to be super evil and wrong in this situation. It's like it still doesn't change the fact is that things played out this way. You like Keaton's kind of been stepping over boundaries. So Daniel, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. But Daniel is bringing up the fact of the matter is you'll lose your job too because you're so fixated on this situation. Yes, like Daniel had to cross a line, but the fact of the matter is it turned out to be right. The fact of the matter is there's going to be a big attack on this country, and you're going to be responsible for not stepping up when you had the chance of getting in the way because there's one man that's trying to stop it who can stop it, you know, suggesting Keaton. But sadly, when it's all said and done, Daniel didn't sell him out. It's like, yeah, he loves his job and everything. And it's so interesting because amongst anyone that's a part of that group, I'd say probably the most, well, I mean, everyone in that group is fairly honest. Obviously, like everyone's kind of gotten a little corrupt. You can make the argument because that's the whole conversation of like, oh yeah, like, you know, Shepard's been rubbing off a little bit on Keaton. But maybe all of this is kind of rubbing off on Daniel too, because I think it turns into that conversation of what's for the greater good. If I have to sacrifice my job so that Keaton's able to keep doing his and take down a terrible human being like Tall, then it's all worth it, you know, in the end. So that's why I chalk it up. I don't think Montanello is behind this. I think she's just stickler for the rules. I mean, maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe she is behind. Like the whole point is this to dismantle the team. I doubt it, but ultimately we'll kind of have to wait and see. What I also thought was kind of interesting is that Belle came to see Shepard and was like, oh yeah, you know what I think is kind of, oh, that's your daughter. She would have been roughly about 12 when you got arrested, right? Well, the fact of the matter is she uses an example of an operation she was a part of, and to get this guy to do what she wanted, it's like, oh yeah, like used his son, I think it was his son, as leverage. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing about parents. They're willing to do whatever it takes for their kids. That's a lesson that I learned. And she just kind of leaves after finding out. So I was like, what are you planning on doing with that information? She doesn't need Shepard to figure it, but she figures like your daughter was used against you. That's why this all happened. I mean, to be fair, she probably still goes, you're still responsible for all this, but now she understands why she did what she did. Because in her case, it's like, well, I don't have any kids, so I'm not bound by that. But a typical parent would do anything to protect their child, you know? So I'm curious to see will Belle do anything with that information. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously there's a whole conversation too that, you know, happens between Shepard and Will. I thought was kind of nice where, you know, Shepard was like, you told me when we first met that there is no such thing as redemption for someone like me. Is that still true? And he's like, yes. But he's like, but I hope I'm wrong. The fact is that this is it. It's kind of all or nothing for us. And he's like, I want to know that that you've got my back when it's all said and done. And she's like, yeah, I will all the way. But obviously she wants to visit, you know, Hannah. Chris is obviously hesitant, like, oh, I already told you, but she's like, you always were never allowed to know where I was going, but you always knew in some shape or form because you had a feeling like, yeah, this might be one of those times I'm going off somewhere that I might not come back from. This is one of those times. And I love that conversation she has with Hannah because obviously it's like, oh, let me know about your life and everything, but she tells her and she can tell she's kind of breaking down a little bit. Telling the story of like, oh, she's always been very decisive of like, oh yeah, like I had to jump out planes when I first joined the CIA and stuff like that as part of training. Hannah's like, whoa, she's like, yeah, it's going, like, you know, it's no big deal, you know. And then I thought it was kind of sweet the whole story she told of like, yeah, she would do it over and over again every time without even really thinking about it. That'd just be her first instinct because it's like that's how she operated. But the moment she found out she was pregnant with Hannah, things changed. It's like, okay, so how can I be how can I be so quick to make these decisions? I got to protect my baby. Like, I got to look after her. And the fact of the matter is, it's like, she knows that, you know, in front of her, Hannah is going to become a great woman already, and that it's at that stage of becoming a great woman, is a great woman. And the fact is that, you know, having her and being her mom is kind of the best decision. She's made a lot of mistakes that have hurt Hannah, Chris, and a lot of other people, but having Hannah being her mom was not one of them. You know, because it's that thing of like, you know, kind of that conversation of a parent will do whatever it takes to protect their child, always look out for the best interest that they are, you know, because I'm sure for Shepard it's like Hannah is the best parts of her. She's kind of just the best in general, you know. So she gets to, you know, hug her daughter, tell her she loves her, and Hannah responds, I love you in return, you know. So Shepard kind of gets to go into this next situation, with that kind of not worried, because she's worried that she might not come back from this. Now this turns into a whole thing of like, okay, so it seems like so far Shepard's playing both sides, but it seems like she's leaning more towards Keaton's side. Potentially, I still believe everything regarding, Tall is all a means to an end to get close to him, ready for the moment to strike. I was actually kind of halfway expecting her multiple times throughout this episode to actually tell Will the truth and be like, okay, I've been in contact with Tall, but nevertheless, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this takes us, going forward into the next episode, what the exact attack is that Tall has planned. It's all going down tomorrow, because apparently tomorrow's the anniversary. Well, in the context of the episode, tomorrow is the anniversary of his brother's death. So this has been a long time coming. It's actually kind of crazy to think that, because he was basically in the Russian equivalency to the CIA or something like that, but he had left a little bit before he got recruited by the CIA and stuff like that for information. But nevertheless, it's just kind of interesting to think that, once again, just showing you just what can turn someone down a completely dark path. It's it seemed like he was a decent dude beforehand, but it took one tragedy to kind of turn him into a monster. Hell, look at Erica's situation. I guess that kind of makes him even more similar, because it's just kind of a choice was made for you. It's he was trying to do right by him and his brothers, and they ended up dying for it. And obviously Erica's paying the price for trying to do what's right by, protecting her little girl. So you can definitely see some parallels there. Maybe that's why Tall did what he did, because he, knows that family could be a weakness to kind of put you in a position that normally you wouldn't be in. It's if it wasn't for his brothers, they wouldn't have gotten to him like that. So maybe that's why he does what he does. That's why he took advantage. To be fair, he takes advantage of a lot of weaknesses from people, but still, that's where my mind is. I could have a wrong way of thinking and looking at it, but I just think it's kind of fascinating when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But nevertheless, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see what goes down in the next episode, because the next episode is in fact the season finale, and I'm so curious to see how they end up wrapping this whole situation up, if they even wrap it up. Now, let's just see how everything ends up playing out. Once again, Daniel's kind of walking away from this situation with no badge, and I'm curious, when it's all said and done, will it be worth it? Will you have Keaton making certain sacrifices? Will stuff that Shepard has set up to this point get to him? He talks about he doesn't have to be a murderer to take down Tall, but foreshadowing makes you wonder if that's going to be the case, or will it be, Erica pulling a trigger so that Keaton doesn't have to? We'll ultimately have to wait and see what the season finale has in store for us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.